Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Davenport, Dean of Rockefeller Chapel, and it's my great honor to welcome you to this opening convocation. Students here in this magnificent building, and your families and friends who are watching and cheering you on from the quadrangles. Class of 2021, this splendid day has arrived when you take your place as students at the University of Chicago. Congratulations. Today, you join generations of scholars whose unquenchable thirst for knowledge has enriched all life. You will learn from those who teach you here, and also significantly from each other. You bring with you as a class an extraordinary variety of experience and diversity of background, and it's our fervent hope that you will come to embrace a deep respect for one another as students and for all that you each represent in viewpoint, in scholarship, in identity, in being. We encourage you, each of you, to engage wholeheartedly with the life of the university and with the many new experiences that await you here, both inside and outside the classroom. May your quest for new understanding, new knowledge, be shaped by a sense of limitless horizon and of the depths of possibility within you. Families, as you leave your students here this day, and we know that this is a big day for you, may your care continue to nourish them as they begin this new journey in this great place of learning, a journey of growth and of growing independence, a journey that will set them each on their own life's course to fulfill their individual promise and destiny. Please know that each of us here in the college and in the university will do all in our power to help them flourish, to make them wise. We know that you are immensely proud of them, and we share your pride in their accomplishments and in all that they will become. And now, with great pleasure, I introduce to you all Jeff Schwimmer, who is here to represent the alumni of the University of Chicago. Alumni play an extraordinarily important part in the life of the university and in the lives of our students. Jeff is here to make the beginnings of that connection for each of you and to receive the Class of 2021 banner. Jeff.
Good afternoon. It is my great pleasure to speak to you today as the president of the university's Alumni Board. On behalf of the board, the Alumni Association, and the worldwide alumni community, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this community. 42 years ago or so, I sat in this same spot, probably somewhere in this front section, because we had about 1/4 the class size that you do. But I sat in the same spot where you are sitting now, wondering how my life was going to change. I wasn't even 18 years old yet. That would come a few days later. But my father's dear friend, Alan Peskin, a professor at Cleveland State University, who himself had sat in these pews several years before, had guided me to the university. I applied early decision, and I was accepted. But I was so nervous before that, waiting to hear. It was excruciating. And then one of my good friends took pity on me and he said, "Jeff, don't worry. Any day now you're going to get a letter saying, please come to the University of Chicago. And it's going to be signed by Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and Princeton." I had grown up in a suburban Cleveland, Ohio, and attended a large public high school. I was 16th in my class of over 900, and 1/2 hour into orientation week, I was intimidated. I wasn't the smartest kid in the room anymore. Maybe I was the dumbest. And that is my most vivid memory of those first days here in 1975 when I came to the University of Chicago. My 4 years as an undergraduate here are some of the best years of my life. I made lifelong friends. I had the privilege to learn from some of the best and finest scholars in academia, and I even managed to have fun along the way. The college has come a long way since 1979. I've had the privilege to get to know Dean Boyer, who has taken a great college and raised it to new heights that very few colleges can even aspire to emulate. In so many ways, the college experience today is light years ahead of when I attended. Look at the dorms around campus, built by award-winning architects. I would argue that our housing now rivals any college anywhere. The university has broadened our academic reach and launched new programs like the Institute for Molecular Engineering. And college students have a whole new array of classes and research opportunities that we never dreamed of. And you can benefit from the Metcalf internship program, which placed over 2,000 undergraduates into paying internships last year. To my knowledge, this is by far the biggest college-sponsored internship program anywhere. Nevertheless, I can tell you that certain things remain the same. I can guarantee that while you are here, you will be exposed to a world of ideas that change the way you think. You will make friends who, like you, will love to debate these ideas anytime and anywhere. And you will be tested in ways that you have never before experienced. You are now part of a community unlike any other that you have been part of before. There are over 170,000 living alumni of the university. Everywhere you go, in this city, in this country, in every corner of the world, you will run into fellow alumni. And all of us, 170,000 strong, are invested in your success here and beyond Hyde Park. I hope you share the pride that I have in being associated with the finest university and the finest college in the world. I hope you will be committed and engaged alumni for the rest of your lives, giving back to the university with your time and treasure, but mostly by welcoming the future alumni as we are welcoming you here today. When I graduated, people asked me what I thought I had gotten out of my college experience. I repeat today for you what I originally said back in 1979, right after graduation. The University of Chicago taught me how to think. My wish for all of you is that in 4 years after your graduation, that you will proudly feel and say the same thing. And it's now my pleasure to wish you the best of luck and to present Hanley D'Onofrio and Miles Hudson with the Class of 2021 banner.
Welcome to the University of Chicago, everybody. Congratulations. Yeah. All right. Well, I did tell you it would all work out, and now here you are. You made it. You guys are awesome, as individuals and as a class. Congratulations, and get excited for an incredible 4 years that you're going to have. Now, I know I shouldn't say this, but you're probably the best class I've ever admitted. It's true. Don't tell the upperclassmen I said that. At least U.S. News seems to think so. Given your past accomplishments and future aspirations, I am certain you will make incredible contributions to our campus, and I look forward to seeing the impact that you will make on the world. President Zimmer, as the Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid, I am pleased and quite proud to officially present to you, Dean Boyer and the faculty, the outstanding class of 2021.
Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you, the University of Chicago class of 2021, and our new transfer students to the University of Chicago. And it's likewise a pleasure to welcome the parents of our new students who are viewing this event today, for you are also joining the University of Chicago community. The University of Chicago is a distinctive institution with a history of remarkable achievement and a particular view of and commitment to education and research. Most of us who have spent many years here believe that there is no place that's more exciting, more challenging, or more enriching, and no university that plays a more important role in the history and landscape of American higher education, or indeed higher education worldwide. I'd like to say a few words about why this is and what this will mean for your experience here as students in the college. And I'd also like to say a few words about why we believe that you who are about to enter the college are just the right students to be here and the important role that you will play in this community. The University of Chicago is an institution driven from its inception by an idea that one could create and continuously renew a university focused on rigorous, intense inquiry and analysis. The university, through its work every day, expresses the view that clarity derives from the clash of ideas and the willingness to accept answers only when they meet the tests of argument. We believe that the best education and the most empowering education takes place in the environment of constant challenge implicit in this culture of rigorous inquiry, and that this culture is responsible for producing ideas of power and importance to humankind. This focus on rigorous inquiry has defined the University of Chicago, its research and its education at all levels since its beginning, and it continues to do so today. Now, what does this culture of inquiry really mean? It's useful to illustrate with an example, so as the word inquiry itself implies, let's begin with a question. Namely, what are you doing when you were engaged in a discussion? What is the point of argument? Now, if you're like many people, the point is to convince the other person that they have it all wrong and that you have it all right. We've certainly all, at one time or another, engaged in such argument. However, for our work at the university, that is not really the point of discussion or argument. That point, rather, is to take the issue in question and explore arguments from all perspectives. Which arguments are valid under what circumstances, which stand scrutiny, what are their power and what are their limitations, how they relate, how they comport with various data, and so on. The goal is greater clarity about arguments from all perspectives on the issue. Embedded in this approach is the understanding that most often all arguments do not point in the same direction, and a given argument's power and limitations must be understood simultaneously. Problems are complex. There are systemic interactions. Single actions have both benefits and undesirable consequences. Seemingly simple assertions can have complex implications. Arguments apply with more power in some circumstances and are more limited in others. New data can always emerge and must be sought. The more one argues and discusses, the more data that are brought to bear, related questions raised and analyzed, and perspectives are incorporated into the analysis, then the fabric of understanding becomes richer and the approach to problems becomes more nuanced. In our culture of inquiry, understanding becomes complex, expandable, and fluid rather than simple and rigid. I want to emphasize that this approach is not at all equivalent to saying that all arguments have merit. In fact, quite the contrary. This approach asserts that all arguments, no matter how comfortable or familiar, require scrutiny, and quite explicitly recognizes the difficulty of establishing merit in arguments. Another feature of the intellectual environment at UChicago is that problems are taken on their own terms. By this, I mean that many problems do not present themselves neatly along lines of traditional and important academic disciplines. This is not to devalue the disciplines. On the contrary, the disciplines provide important developed modes of inquiry that have great explanatory power. However, they also have limitations. And for many important questions, one must understand and bring to bear the depth of perspective of several disciplines. This intellectual porosity and multidisciplinary engagement are other key aspects of the University of Chicago, emanating directly from the integrity of our approach to inquiry. Intellectual porosity also has a significant impact on what it feels like to be a member of the University of Chicago community. As mathematics faculty member for many years, I was always aware of being part of a larger institution with a commitment to rigorous inquiry and a corresponding sense of its own mission. The University of Chicago never feels like an intellectual holding company for disparate disciplines. It has a sense of wholeness and unity of purpose that is very distinctive. The core curriculum, a source of innovation in higher education, whose value continues to resonate, is one realization of this unity of purpose. I'm confident that you will come to share this sense of the university. Now, in order for you to most benefit from and best contribute to this environment, you must develop the skills and the approach of holding competing perspectives in your mind simultaneously, listening to the arguments of others, and both understanding and challenging them. At the same time, you must challenge your own assumptions, and this is often the hardest part for anyone, while ultimately still forging your own synthesis. It is a level of thought and analysis that leaves the simple who is right and who is wrong far behind. Here at the University of Chicago, you will find that an argument must stand on its own and will not necessarily hold up to scrutiny because it is common or because it is popular. What you will discover is a community that finds intense, rigorous engagement tremendously exciting, enjoyable, challenging, empowering, and gratifying, and with a great sense of community and commonality around this distinctive experience. Entering this community, meeting so many new people, and engaging new challenges as you now are is exciting, but sometimes it can also be a little bit intimidating. You'll find yourself needing to take some risks, engaging in conversation and debate, and being open-minded to what others are saying. You'll learn a great deal from your early engagements, from your fellow students, from the faculty, and you will likewise contribute a great deal. It may not all come together immediately, but this exploration and experimentation will be part of your learning process. You will soon find your footing and discover that you can, in fact, do all of this very, very well. I want to return to one word I just used, namely empowering, and briefly address another question. Why exactly is education at the University of Chicago so empowering, as so many of our students, ultimately turned alumni, have found for generations? To begin to answer this, let's look a bit at the difference between action and analysis. Action has an either-or quality. Taking action can lead to intended benefits and a desired end, but sometimes to undesired consequences as well. What would be the best approach to taking such action? With the simple and comfortable belief that one is right and it is all for the best, or with the habit of mind to realize that in many cases, all arguments for a particular action are not on one side, and that one can understand and anticipate the full context and consequences of an act, the downside as well as the upside. What the analytic culture of inquiry at UChicago provides is a lifelong set of skills and approach to the world that eschews simplicity and comfort in favor of analysis, inquiry, and the recognition of complexity. It empowers appropriate action because it strives to understand its full implications. In fostering the habit of questioning, it simultaneously fosters imagination and creativity of action. It is this approach that has empowered so many of our students over the years and provided the environment for our faculty's research. It is what has empowered our faculty and alumni to challenge conventional wisdom, define new disciplines, make imaginative and creative contributions to almost every domain of human endeavor, assume leadership positions throughout the world, and in fact, change the world. And it will do this for you as well. Diversity has a very particular role at the University of Chicago and in the University of Chicago's history. The nature of questions being asked and perspectives being expressed are often a function of the experiences and outlooks of those participating. Diversity for the university is therefore particularly germane to our core mission. So we must ensure that our scholarly and education community is comprised of a rich mix of individuals who, through their own distinctive viewpoints, background, and experience, contribute to the intellectually challenging culture of inquiry at the university. And our history reflects this openness and approach. The university has, unlike many of our peer institutions, always been open to women as well as men. The first doctorate earned by a black woman in the United States was awarded in 1921 at the University of Chicago. We were among the first major non-historically black universities to tenure a black faculty member. Contributions by Asian American scholars in the 1920s were essential to the university's landmark research in sociology. At a time when other elite institutions systematically discriminated against Jews, the University of Chicago refused to set quotas. We have long been a magnet for students from Mexico and South America. Our Odyssey and No Barriers programs and other financial aid programs are designed to ensure we remain accessible and attractive to outstanding, talented students from low and moderate income families, and that these students have the capacity to take full advantage of their time at the University of Chicago. Throughout its history, the university has acted on the belief that the capacity to contribute was not limited to specific groups, and moreover, and very importantly, that the richness of the community directly contributed to the richness of the intellectual environment. The university that you are entering has been built by many persons over more than a century. Every generation and thousands of individuals have made contributions to its strength, culture, achievements, and vitality. Each of us at the university today, faculty, students, administrators, and staff, are the beneficiaries of those who came before us, who gave to the university through their work, their commitment, their financial contributions, and their advocacy. It is this legacy that we all inherit together, and it is this legacy on which we will all build together. You will contribute to this legacy through your own work in the college when you reassemble in 4 years' time to celebrate the completion of your studies at senior class day, and through your continued engagement with the university after you graduate. You are becoming part of the continuum of the history of this institution. A key part of this history is the singular role the University of Chicago has had in maintaining open inquiry, supporting free expression, and ensuring that those in our community are free to express and to hear ideas, even if others find them uncomfortable or even objectionable. The University of Chicago today remains the national leader among universities and colleges in articulating the importance of free expression and open discourse to the quality of education. It is in part because the environment of free expression and open discourse is challenging that it is a key and integral part of the quality of your education and that of every student at the university. And as a member of the University of Chicago community, it will be your responsibility to take part in and preserve this culture of openness and free expression. So this is something about the university, and now what about you, our students entering the college this fall? You've come from all over the world with a wide variety of backgrounds, interests, and ambitions. But most importantly, you have each, every one of you, convinced us that you are exactly the right students who can most contribute to and most benefit from the culture I have described. You've convinced us by the work you've done, the presentation you've made of your abilities, interests, and outlook, the recommendations of those who know you, and your demonstrated commitment that you will be wonderful and full members of the University of Chicago community and all that that entails. It is for all these reasons that the University of Chicago and all it represents has chosen to invest in you. The university community that you join is comprised of your fellow students in the college and beyond the college, the university's faculty, administrators, and staff, our trustees, alumni, and committed friends, our students and alumni parents, and those who have been here before as faculty and administrators, and it will soon include those who come after you. It is a community of enormous energy, excitement, challenge, and enjoyment in ongoing mutual learning. While you are of course focused on the next 4 years, you are entering a community that you will be part of for many, many years to come. Before closing, I want to say a few words to the parents who may be viewing. Having been through this myself 3 times, I know that sending one's children off to college is not a simple act. It is exciting, although a bit anxiety-provoking. It is an act of significant financial commitment. It is also an act of trust. Trust in your children that they will take advantage of the extraordinary opportunities that college affords them. Trust in yourselves that you have done your job to this point as parents and can watch and hopefully enjoy your children's growth in the next phase of life. And of course, trust in the institution they attend. You are entrusting us at the University of Chicago with the education of your children, now our students. And I know that for most of you, there is nothing that is more important. And likewise for us at the University of Chicago, there is nothing more important. So to new students and parents alike, welcome to the University of Chicago. It is, for all the reasons I've described, a university like no other, where you will have an education like no other. You're now part of this extraordinary and distinctive community with its remarkable legacy and its remarkable future. It will be a great adventure. Enjoy it.
My name is John Boyer. I have the honor to speak to you today as the Dean of your college and as a professor in the Department of History. I'm delighted to see so many of you in front of me and also in back of me, and a warm welcome especially to your parents who are in the central quadrangles observing us on television. Opening day is a time for hope, for enthusiasm, for pride. And on such days as this one does begin to understand the efficacy of these extraordinary communities that we call universities. I can imagine that many of you sitting in the chapel today are a bit anxious, both about the place to which you've come and about your fate here over the next several years. But about the second issue, your personal futures, I want to reassure you immediately we would not have admitted you. We're very confident you're going to be successful. You wouldn't be sitting here if we didn't think you were going to be extraordinarily successful. So you really should relax, enjoy these coming days, and rest assured that you're in the right place at the right time, and as they say, with the right stuff. Now, as to the kind of place that you've joined, this is a little bit more complicated. In joining this particular community, you become a member of one of the world's great universities, not only because of the scholarly ancestors, whom you can now claim proudly, I hope, or because of the distinguished women and men who will teach you, but because you yourselves will add to the great reservoir of knowledge and talent, interest and commitment that is at the core of any serious university. And universities are very old institutions. They're among the oldest institutions of our culture and our civilization. They date from the 12th century in Europe, where students and teachers gathered in cathedral schools to pursue common interest in learning. And over the course of the centuries, the universities in Europe and in America and elsewhere in the world have been sources of a great deal of social and cultural continuity, but also radical intellectual and scientific change. And any great university is an amalgam of many streams of aspirations and hopes sustained by many generations of members of the community. And wondrously, this process of aspiration and hope is genuinely democratic, for no one owns this university, no one owns any university. Rather, it owns all of us. Chicago, the University of Chicago, is a proud and ambitious place, and it's also an institution which you will quickly find has developed certain special ways of talking and thinking about its identity that in turn have helped to create the vibrant living memory of our community. And I want to give you two examples of this identity creation process today. The first involves the impulse of the university, and I think this is particularly the case in our university, to see itself as having a universal mission that is almost timeless in its verity, standing apart from the messiness of any particular time or place in our civilization. And one sees this impulse in our selection of symbols. We are a university that is deeply fond of symbols, even if those symbols are sometimes strangely constructed. The motto of our university, Crescat Scientia Vita Excolator, which is translated generally, let knowledge grow from more to more, and so be human life enriched. This motto is actually a hybrid-like adaptation created by a clever faculty member before 1900, who graphed together selected lines from Tennyson's poem In Memoriam and from Virgil's great heroic epic, the Aeneid. But over the years, generations of students and faculty have found this rhetorical offspring of Virgil and Tennyson reassuring in its mix of Roman civic virtue and Gilded Age enthusiasm, not only because it connoted the purpose of the university as engendering pure learning, but also because in its dignity and simple logic, it clothed the university with a seemingly universal mission that was beyond the messiness of the harsh urban civilization, Chicago in the 1890s, in which we were founded. This artificial combination of the Roman and the Victorian was, however, disagreeable to one of our most prominent presidents, a man by the name of Robert Maynard Hutchins, who became president in 1929, who was the son of a learned and pious Presbyterian minister and a young Yale Law School dean, who became our president at the age of 30. Hutchins was an iconic guy, a rather revolutionary guy. He didn't like this motto at all. He's perhaps best known as the president who supported the work of the faculty in creating the core curriculum, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But in 1944, Hutchins was also the man who went before a dinner of trustees and faculty and said that we were sorely in need of a new motto. We needed a new motto. And here's what he said, quote, "I must confess that I've never liked the motto of the university, Crescat Scientia Vita Excolata, or let knowledge grow, that life may be enriched. In the first place," and I'm quoting Hutchins, "it seems incongruous and affected for those rugged and unsophisticated pioneers of the 1890s who founded our university to think up a Latin slogan for their raw new university. In the second place, I don't like the word enriched. It's ambiguous. I do not like the materialistic interpretation to which it's open. Therefore, I suggest," this is Hutchins, "a new motto for the university, one which will express its spirit and its purpose as it sallies forth to battle in the revolution that must come to pass if men are lived together in peace. The new motto I suggest for the university is a line from Walt Whitman. It is this: solitary, singing in the West, I strike up for a new world." For Hutchins, Whitman spoke in defense of a different kind of greatness, the uniquely American adventure of creating through education a new and better world for ourselves and our posterity. And for Hutchins, the university's mission was not simply universal and timeless, but also it involved a kind of truth that would have a powerful cultural impact on the society of the time. Now that was one motto. I should say, parenthetically, we never changed the motto, so Hutchins was disappointed. But a second example of this collision between memory and identity involves stories that presume that we were created effortlessly, heroically, with the force of a brilliant and benevolent providence behind us. And this idea is reflected in the simple but elegant statement found in many of the official publications of the university that state that this university was, quote, "founded by John D. Rockefeller," end quote, as if the university was somehow hatched out of a large philanthropic egg bestowed by Mr. Rockefeller in 1890. Now, the university did profit enormously from the generous philanthropy of Mr. Rockefeller to the tune of $35 million between 1892 and 1910, and another $35 million that his son and various relatives subsequently gave us, all of which added to, in today's currency, almost $1 billion, which is a lot of money. And this magnificent chapel in which we're sitting today is named in honor of Mr. Rockefeller, and it was built with his money. It not only provides the functional spaces to celebrate religious ceremonies of many denominations, but it's also a kind of speaking architecture. The building itself is a kind of speaking architecture, sanctifying the massive wealth and self-confidence that seemed to make the founding of this university a simple, secure, and almost sacred act. A sacred act, one that had to happen to a wise and to a good people. But in fact, the origins of our university are much more complex and anchored in a history of courageous risk-taking in the face of adversity and ambivalence. And I'd like to take a few minutes this afternoon to tell you that particular story because it does bear, it seems to me, directly and greatly on the kind of education you can give yourself in the next 4 years. The first institution to bear the name University of Chicago was not the institution founded by John D. Rockefeller in 1890. Rather, the first college to bear that name was created in 1856 when a prominent citizen of Chicago who owned some land called Oakenwald on the south side of the city, Senator Stephen A. Douglas, offered a group of local Baptists 10 acres of this land. This was at 34th Street and Cottage Grove Avenue, between Cottage Grove and Rhodes Avenue. Today, if you go down there, and I hope many of you will, it's a wonderful historic site involving the tomb of Stephen Douglas. It's a parking lot for a big food store, and so it's probably the most famous parking lot in the city of Chicago. In any event, dedicated to westward expansion and being a strong advocate of the commercial and cultural development of the early city, Douglas wanted to found a good college, a good liberal arts college in Chicago. And he did it. He gave the Baptists 10 acres of land to do this. The first university, founded in 1856, had as its mission to be a decidedly Christian but not sectarian. That's the way they talked about themselves. They were decidedly Christian but not sectarian university under the stewardship of the Baptist Church. And then on the day-to-day level, this idea translated into the customary studies of a frontier American liberal arts college, classics and grammar, some science, and an agricultural school whose name was to apply science to agriculture. The first University of Chicago was thus built on the model of a frontier town, church-sponsored college in the 19th century American West, and there were hundreds of these colleges all over America at the time. And yet, within 3 decades, the promise of this early university failed miserably. The old university had 2 rival identities, and the more and more they came in conflict. One was as a Baptist denominational school. The other was as a general agent of civic progress for the city of Chicago, aiding Chicago in its general cultural development. As a missionary church, the Baptists in Chicago were at home, frankly, on the margins of society where conversion was crucial, not in the increasingly wealthy and complicated multi-ethnic metropolis where new cultural structures and new understandings of American history were being built and quickly deposited, which was really what Chicago had become by the late 19th century. In spite of efforts to persuade the wealthy and civic elites of Chicago to give contributions, the university was bereft of any significant financial support in the 1870s and 1880s. And this forlorn image of a university, debt-ridden, badly managed, did not inspire philanthropy of any kind, and certainly not the investments of the level that would transform it to an institution worthy of this newly emerging industrial and commercial metropolis. Unable to pay its bills, the University of Chicago went bankrupt. It collapsed in 1886, much to the shame, the deep and profound shame of the men and women who were running it. And among the many reasons for its failure, I think the most important explanation lies in the fact that the first university's educational mission and its foundations were less. They were much less than the hugely expanding metropolis of Chicago deserved and merited. In a word, the place failed because in its simple modesty it lacked strong visionary leaders who could mobilize sentiment on behalf of a more ambitious conception of higher education, one that went beyond the practical vocationalism of a mid-19th century undergraduate college. Such a leader who would make this change was to take his place on the scene in the later 1880s in the person of William Rainey Harper. Harper, who was a prodigiously ambitious academic entrepreneur. He was born in rural Ohio in 1856, ironically the same year in which the first university was founded. He received a PhD degree in ancient languages from Yale University when he was 19 years old. He was something of a wunderkind. Harper, too, was a Baptist, and he had close connections with Chicago, having been appointed in 1879 as a professor of Hebrew at the Morgan Park Academy, which was a seminary that the Baptists ran on the far south side of Chicago. It wasn't part of the first university, but there were connections. And Harper eventually returned to Yale to become a professor of Semitic language in 1886. But his friends knew him to be a very talented guy, a very ambitious guy, and they never forgot about him. When the legal and financial bankruptcy of the first university settled in and generated such immense shame among local Baptist leaders, they immediately launched an appeal for a new and more solid enterprise. And Harper was the man they thought capable of giving the new foundation the leadership to secure its future. It would take another 3 years of intense appeals to John D. Rockefeller, but in the end, Harper agreed to become the president of a new University of Chicago when Rockefeller promised a cornerstone gift of $600,000, and Rockefeller promised his gift while emphatically hoping that Harper would agree to be president. The process was lumpy, politically uncertain, and by no means fated to succeed. Rockefeller himself had grave doubts about the ability of the Baptists to use this second chance well. The general consensus among the elites of Chicago is the Baptists had bungled the management of the first university. Why pour more money, good money, into the same swamp of denominational parochialism and intellectual short-sightedness? But anyway, in any event, the university was founded. They got it going in 1890, and we officially opened our doors in 1892. To convince the civic elites of Chicago, and I think even more importantly, the academic elites of the nation, that the new university would differ profoundly from the old, Harper needed a new plan. And the plan that he developed had a logic, and I would say in a kind of Hegelian sense, a Geist, profoundly different from that of a denominational college. Harper conceived of a non-sectarian, secular research university that would include an undergraduate college open equally to both women and men, The fact that we were coeducational from the very beginning, which was historically significant in this country, but also very important for our own history. He wanted an undergraduate college open to both men and women. He wanted a preparatory school, a K through 12 school that would prepare students for that college. He wanted an extension division for adult education. He wanted a university press that would publish scholarly books and learned journals. And I think more than anything else, he wanted a graduate school modeled on the great research universities of Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. He staffed this new university with a faculty of 120 eminent scholars, many of whom had studied at top-ranked European and especially German universities. And in ruthless contrast to the practices of the old university, Harper treated his faculty as agents of professional prestige, whose individual and collective research attainments, sanctioned by the competitive and meritocratic standards of a new national scholarly community filled with journals and international conferences and professional organizations, this faculty would define the very essence of what the university was and would become. Harper believed in relentless competition based on merit, not only for the faculty, but also for the students, even if weaker souls found this discomforting. Research became the new coin of the realm, and it was seen as salutary not only as a way of advancing new knowledge, but as a way to demonstrate to the civic elites and to anybody who would listen the imagination, the creativity, and the professionalism of the faculty, and of mobilizing and legitimating the expertise of a new university to improve the civic world of the city. Hence, in stark contrast to the parochialism of the first University of Chicago, Harper draped his university with a more capacious understanding of its responsibilities to the city. Erudition and social improvement would elevate Chicago's public culture well beyond the Baptist community. And with this new model, the university attracted powerful local support, including generous donations from other Protestant denominations, as well as from a group of very prominent and successful Jewish citizens. Altogether, they were a remarkable group of Chicagoans, men and women who represented the new social and industrial elites of the late 19th century metropolis. And the university, our university, now became what the city had already become. If the city of Chicago had remained like Galesburg, Illinois, or Gambier, Ohio, Douglas's University of Chicago might not have failed. And today's University of Chicago would be like Kenyon or Knox colleges, good, small institutions with their roots in a pioneer Protestant and denominational past, begun as church foundations at about the same time as the founding of the town. But in its second founding, the University of Chicago was profoundly different. To match the city's growing economic and social and political reach, the collegiate ideal appropriate to a small-town college was overtaken by the larger and more explicitly worldly enterprise of the research university. The whole project was filled with risk, enormous risk, but the resultant university combined at one and the same time a deep commitment to merit and to self-achievement. It was a place where one could, and one still can, reinvent oneself many times over, and where the allure of conformity, mediocrity, and crowd values, which the English philosopher John Stuart Mill so feared, where these values had little sway. It was an institution that had a zealous conviction in the worldliness of the liberal arts, but also blended those convictions with very pragmatic attitudes toward the professions and toward the engagement with the city. And when we describe Chicago, as I have done and as my colleague Bob Zimmer has done before me, as an ideal university, we're referring to its commitment to the logic and purpose of what a true university should be. It seeks not to shelter its members from hard and discomforting facts, but to enable them to achieve disciplined self-enlightenment. Nowadays, all great universities claim such norms, but Chicago's success in embracing and sustaining them is deeply rooted in our own history, a history of early failure. The fact that we failed the first time is profoundly important for our history. We got a coveted second chance, and we made use of that second chance. Nowadays, all universities claim these norms, but our history really justified and enabled success in sanctioning and embracing those norms. This was a university that was particularly dedicated to the idea of academic freedom at a time when such ideas were not well understood in American society. The right to stare new and uncomfortable realities in the face and to respond with reason and argument, not with emotion, came not because such notions were pleasing and attractive or because the left or the right liked them, but because they were fundamental to the pursuit of basic research. No free ideas, no academic freedom, no research. It would have been impossible for Harper to launch the second University of Chicago without giving the faculty and the students the moral and political space to speak their own minds and to fulfill their own scholarly ambitions. And although our core curriculum, which Bob Zimmer has already made reference to, comes later in our history, it was founded in the 1930s, it would have been impossible for the faculty to create the core without the prior creation of a campus academic culture dedicated to the liberal arts that took undergraduate learning seriously, and without the assemblage of a student body who willingly understood that they too were expected to take that learning seriously. Among the central functions of the core that you will begin in about 8 days' time is not only to introduce you in a rigorous way to some of the great intellectual traditions of the past, but also to help you learn the difference between an opinion and an argument. An opinion and an argument. And to learn to respect and indeed to admire well-crafted arguments, even if they lead to conclusions that you find profoundly disagreeable. We do not seek in the core to give you morsels of knowledge for your personal edification, nor do we intend to infuse your minds with principles by which you might happily or even sanely live. We do hope to expose you to some of the most compelling and distinguished intellectual traditions of our shared historical world, to invite you to interrogate their logic, to understand their premises, think critically about them, using original sources and original documents to do so. But we have no idea, no desire to make you into our or anyone else's image and likeness. Robert Hutchins put this point rather well when he observed that the university has never had an axe to grind. It has refused to be a grindstone for anybody else. In fact, we have no intention of telling you what you should think, since ultimately that is your responsibility. As one of the founders of the core, Professor Harry Gideon put it in the 1930s, if there's one duty that could be singled out as a primary one for the college teacher in the core, it would be to cultivate a gingerly attitude against easy generalizations and uninformed efforts to build systems, unquote. And you will also profit from the fact that the civic donors who helped Harper and Rockefeller launch the new university expected you, the students, to use your education to have a discernible impact on the city's commercial institutions and its free professions, as well as its schools. Hence the college's recent development of many new career advisory programs, including massive numbers of internships and research opportunities. Jeff has already alluded to those. This is a continuation of a long-standing tradition that does not see the liberal arts on the one hand and the professions on the other as hostile or mutually exclusive forces. Our new career initiatives, run ably by my colleagues in career advancement, they're supervised by Jim Nondorf, and our cooperative programs with our distinguished professional schools like law, business, SSA, public policy, and medicine, and you'll be involved in many of these programs as you follow your curricula. This is unique in American higher education today, and in fact these programs, these joint programs between the college and the professional schools, are latter-day descendants of Harper's early schemes to integrate the world and the work of the units of the university into a larger organic whole, and to prepare our students to cultivate and to lead what Harper called a higher civic life. Harper was particularly pleased with the quality of the college students whom the new university attracted. You are the direct descendants of those students in talent and ambition. And this is now your university. And let me repeat that. This is now your university, as well as ours. And you will have an immense stake now and over the course of your lives in sustaining its many virtues, not in the least because they are virtues that will help each of you become more enlightened and I hope more constructive leaders of our society. What is most characteristic of Chicago, perhaps more so than any other leading American private university, is that the devotion to the liberal arts by our undergraduate students and the devotion to the liberal arts by our faculty substantially overlap. This is a very rare and special circumstance, and one that is the envy of colleges, of colleagues at all other universities. Now, having welcomed you to the college, I wanted to say a few words about the city of Chicago, your new hometown. It's no accident that great universities and great cities often coexist and often overlap. And in coming to Chicago in 2017, you will experience what generations of past students have experienced in this great university set in this remarkable city, creative and demanding intellectual citizenship in a local institution, but set in a city with broad and universal horizons. Our students, both women and men, of all ethnicities and confessions, came and come from a broad spectrum of social backgrounds, And once here, they have fostered deeply personal connections to the urban fabric of the city. Each of you will develop a deeply personal connection to Chicago. And I would venture to say that for each of you, for all 1,740, they will be different connections, but they will be deep and they will be personal. The diversity of cultural perspectives, the plurality of social views, and the rich fabric of cultural and artistic opportunities provided by the great metropolis of Chicago have been crucial over the past century to enhance our capacity to assemble and to empower such a diverse student body with what I would call a highly pragmatic attitude toward life. And the tensions between integration and diversity, between homogeneity and pluralism that filled the debates about globalization and national politics today find no better living example than in the history of this great city. From the beginning, Chicago was a destination for immigrants in the modern world. As late as 1890, first and second generation German people constituted almost a third of the population of the city, and in many neighborhoods, their language, German and not English, was the principal language of commerce and communication. Upon the heels of the Germans came the Irish, the Poles, the Lithuanians, the Swedes, the Norwegians, the Czechs, the Italians, the Russians, the Greeks, and many, many others. During the Great Migration from between 1910 and 1960, hundreds of thousands of African Americans journeyed from the American South to become citizens of the city of Chicago. And after the Second World War, Chicago welcomed still growing Indian, Filipino, Korean, Chinese, Japanese, and Vietnamese communities. And the last 50 years have also seen the emergence of a huge Latino community of peoples from Mexico, Puerto Rico, and Cuba. Even today, the city assembles onto itself a vast array of individuals and families from around the world. Chicago began as a frontier trading post in the 1830s, but it had become by 1900 a global crossroads, the fifth largest city in the world. And the history of this university reflects that development, the enormous population growth of Chicago in the late 19th century. It was accompanied by the assemblage of great wealth, and after 1880 by the emergence of civic and economic elites. These were the same people who not only created our university, they created the Art Institute of Chicago and the Lyric Opera and the Chicago Symphony. These elites were determined to provide the city with cultural institutions appropriate to a world city. And this American progressive faith in science and the conviction that the organization of knowledge might guarantee the progress of society made these civic leaders equally interested in our university and in higher education. The founding of your university is thus an integral part of those final decades of the 19th century when the leaders of Chicago had attained a critical mass of self-confidence necessary to associate public virtue with the fortuitous combination of scientific knowledge and philanthropic wealth. Your university owes much of its character, of its geist, of its soul, and certainly its financial support to your new hometown. Chicago, and I say this as a candid and without any apology as a native son of Chicago. Chicago is it's an amazing city. It has a history that has both defined and often defied its own fate. A city that is a metaphor for American civilization in the 20th century. It's not simply, this is a city with a rich and colorful political history, a political history that detests losers, and that, as one local political wag once put it to a would-be reformer, it's a city that, quote, doesn't want nobody that nobody sent, end quote. It's also a city whose confluence of cultures and ethnicities, languages and religious values, sighted far from the distractions and illusions and perhaps the prejudices of either coast, on the either ocean coast, on the boundary line of the great American West. All of this has given the city a personality of its own, great resilience and determination, pragmatic impatience with what was accomplished yesterday, and yet a tolerance for diversity and difference. Many years ago, the novelist Nelson Algren called Chicago a big shot town, a small shot town, a jet-propelled town, an old-fashioned town built by old world hands with new world tools. And even today, to see the many luminous and stunning skyscrapers of the central city at dusk as the sun sets along the shores of Lake Michigan is to know that those hands and those tools have built a city like no other in our time. Now finally, a word of congratulations to the parents who have joined us today in the Harper Quadrangles. It's a truism that one of the highest hopes that parents everywhere have is to be able to give their children, that's you guys, a better education than they had for themselves. Realistically, of course, none of us, no parent can give you an education. Only you can do that. Only you can give yourself an education. But the parents today have made it possible for you to give yourselves the best possible education, and I think for that they deserve an extraordinary round of congratulations. The process. You know, the process of going to college is complicated for all parents. You know that because you just lived through it. We do our best. I'm a parent like Bob Zimmer. My wife and I also sent 3 kids off to college. They graduated, paid off their debts, married happily, and I have 9 grandchildren. So there is a future to all of you, and if that's the kind of future you want. We parents do our best to advise you, hopefully lightly and subtly, not heavy-handedly, about where to go to college, selection of colleges. And then we all live together through these anxiety-filled months, these months where you're waiting for the famous thick envelopes that Jim Nondorf sends out. Maybe he sends thick emails nowadays, I don't know, but you're waiting, you know what I'm talking about. And then we parents travel long distances to say goodbye to you, the children whom we've known, who we've nurtured, whom we've loved with great passion for almost 2 decades. And on such an occasion, I think we parents are bound to be filled with an enormous pride, and yet with a kind of melancholy about the passing of generations and of time itself. You should be extremely pleased, I'm speaking to the parents today, you should be extremely pleased with the success of your daughters and your sons. That they are here today is their doing, for it was they who used their talents and ways that merited them the opportunity, indeed I would say the privilege, to attend one of the great universities of the world. They will certainly flourish in the college. They're going to have a fantastic experience at Chicago. And I have no doubt that 3 years from now, plus 9 months, we will see all of you parents back on the quadrangles, full of admiration for your sons and daughters' accomplishments, full of pride for their energy and success, and having even greater love, if that is possible, for their compassion, for their generosity, and for their humanity. But they, our students, would not be here today without your help, without your encouragement, without your financial sacrifice, and above all, without your love. And so as the dorm rooms are put in order and the time comes to say goodbye, but of course today we say goodbye only until family weekend in late October, I'm sure that I speak for all of our students, as I speak for myself and for my faculty colleagues, in telling you that we are extraordinarily grateful, we are enormously grateful for your conviction that higher education does matter and that it is extremely valuable to the lives of our children, our students, and even more, I think, for the life of our nation. Now it is our venerable custom that we must divide. After the Motet choir sings the alma mater, I ask the first-year students and the transfer students of the class of 2021 to proceed to your class photograph, after which you will return to your residence halls and have a splendid dinner with your fellow class members. And it gives me a very special pleasure to invite the parents and the other relatives and friends of the class of 2021 to join President Robert Zimmer and other members of the college alumni, faculty, and administration for a reception in Hutchinson Courtyard. Let me close by again welcoming you all of you to this magnificent community. It's a community of zealous intellectual comradeship and deeply supportive friendships. I think most of all, it is a community of fearless learning. I welcome you to this community of fearless learning. I wish all of you a safe and stimulating year. Godspeed to all of you. Thank you very much.